Hello and welcome to the Cold Coffee Club, a podcast brought to you by Houston Moms. We're here to give you a little bit of that mom-to-mom connection, fun, and conversation amidst all the chaos. Join us as we take a break from doing all the things and explore the wide spectrum of this crazy motherhood role. We'll interview fun guests, talk about cool grown-up topics, laugh, share, and grow together. So go ahead, reheat that coffee, and put your feet up. Here we go.
Good morning. Welcome to the Cold Coffee Club. This is Jenny.
And this is Ashley. Good morning.
Hello, Ashley. What tea do you have to spill for us today?
Okay, so I have an interesting story. And if you have any feedback, I'm happy to hear it from you, Jenny, or any of our listeners.
Okay.
So earlier this week, my oldest son, his water cup went missing. And you know those like metal ones that are like real fancy that cost like $20 each?
Yes.
He couldn't find it. And I was like, dude, you need to keep track of your stuff. Like I feel like fourth grade, you should be able to mostly keep track of your stuff. So I was a little frustrated with him. And we had a talk about, money and keeping track of your stuff. So Tuesday he checks the lost and found. He says he can't find it. He had looked everywhere, retraced his steps, couldn't find it. Yesterday, he comes home and says, I got my cup back. And I was like, oh, where was it? And he's like, well, this kid at school stole it from my backpack, took it home, wrote his name on the name label that I had on it, and eventually gave it back on Wednesday. And I'm like, that's really inappropriate. He took it from your backpack? And he's like, yeah. And I have a problem with this. So first off, as a mom, I'm kind of frustrated just because I feel bad for my kid. I gave you a whole reaming about you need to be responsible. And then as just a human and a citizen, I'm kind of this child kind of needs to know that that's not okay.
You can't steal from your,
Yeah. And so I emailed the teacher and just kind of let her know what was going on. And I actually just got the email before we started recording that she was like, we need to figure this out. Do you want to schedule a call? Blah, blah, blah. And so it's just, part of me was, I called my ex-husband and part of me was thinking I was being irrational. It's like, how dare you? The audacity. And I was like, am I being outlandish? And then I talked to one of my teacher friends and he was saying, that's not okay. That's not okay.
Right.
So, I'm kind of teetering on the sides of kid pranks and being silly and not fully understanding that's not okay, but also by fourth grade that you can't just take someone's personal stuff out of their bag. So
well, I mean, my only feedback is one, I think obviously you were not wrong to make your initial judgment and keep track of your stuff, because our kids lose their stuff all the time. Yes. So don't be too hard on yourself about that, because that's just obviously your mind didn't go to that another child took his cup home. Hi. So just, that's number one.
Right.
Number two, I now think now that you know what actually happened, and now that you're oh, I see, it's now shifting to this is now a disciplinary problem for that kid and whatever is going on there. I know there was a long story. I know of a kid that this was a repeated pattern that he was doing at school, where he just was constantly taking things from other children. And it took a while for them to find out who it was, but he was just, and it wasn't always things of great value. It was started off with just a pencil here or just whatever. It's just things that he was just taking. And finally, and again, because they weren't things of great value, people weren't always reporting it, because it was just little, my eraser, my pencil, my little school supplies and things from the teacher's desk. And finally, once they realized what was going on, that's when the teacher had to step in and be like, hey, you're stealing constantly. And so it's not all of those children, or none of these parents were raising flags he stole my child's pencil. This wasn't we're angry that, our property was stolen in that way.
Yeah.
But needed to be done about like, hey, like we can't steal
Right.
people's belongings.
Right.
So obviously that needs to be addressed. And I hope
Yes.
that the teacher addresses it, because
Yes.
if he's doing it to your kid, he's probably doing it to others.
Yeah. It was like the whole all of it was like, you took it home, you wrote your name on it in a
Right.
Sharpie.
That's
like,
the,
what
like,
is
it's
happening?
one thing if you go like, oops, I didn't mean to do this.
Right.
You know, like, because there's sometimes with mix-ups, like, oh man, I took your water,
Right.
but I thought it was mine. I'm sorry. Here, it's
Yeah.
back. You know, but when you write your name on it, like, it's because that
You
means he
it
had
for
to
2
like,
days. I'm like,
Yeah.
what is going on?
Mm-mm.
Yeah. Yeah. So we'll see how it all plays out. But yeah, it was interesting.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, you know. Well, what's your tea for this week?
I was gonna say we took a little 2-night road trip to Waco this weekend. My daughter had her first dance competition of the season, and it was in Waco, and it was fine. We didn't really get to see a ton of Waco because we were at the competition all weekend, but it's so funny because, you know, that's where like the silos are for Magnolia, the Fixer Upper show, Chip and Joanna.
Yeah.
And it's so funny because it's just like truly like that whole thing is just right in the middle of the downtown Waco. It's just right there. And all around it is just like local businesses. And I guess in my mind, I'd always thought it was kind of like out in the outskirts. So I'm like, no, it's right in the middle of town. Like, it was just so funny. And seeing all the women flocking to it and all this, I was like, oh man, look at us. It was pretty funny.
Yeah.
So it was cute. It was really cute.
And how did she do?
Oh, she did great. She did.
Yeah.
It was all of their dances got like kind of the top scores of like the kind of like, if you were to look at it as a grade, they got like an A+ on everything.
Awesome.
And then they got like in the top 10 in all of their dances. So we were really proud of her. So
Yay.
It was cute.
Well, congrats to her. That's awesome.
So what's your cream and sugar this week? What are something you're loving right now?
Yeah, I read a book called The Mamas, What I Learned About Kids, Class, and Race from Moms Not Like Me. The author is Helena Andrews Dyer. And I just read this book just on a whim. I don't know how I found it, but I didn't know anything about the book itself or the author, so I was kind of hesitant to check it out, but it is a game changer. It was just a great reminder of how important it is to build a mom group, to have that support, but also to welcome perspectives other than your own, and connecting with moms who are different than you, come from different backgrounds, different races and everything, and then just embracing the differences, knowing that like, hey, this might not necessarily fit me, or this isn't exactly how I think, but that's okay. I can take some of what you know and some of what you understand the world to be and kind of apply that a little bit to my own life, my own family, my own kids. So I highly recommend this book. I absolutely loved it. It was a fun read. It was very relatable. She's a Black mother and just kind of navigating the world from her perspective, but then also her realizing all these amazing perspectives around her that, you know, sometimes are very conflicting, but sometimes it's like, I needed this. So as moms, I think we really need that mom group. And if you can find a diverse group like the mamas that she describes, you are better for it. So yeah,
such a beautiful, it gives you a much more full perspective when you can have a more diverse group. Wonderful.
Yeah. What about you?
Well, mine, it's not a book, but this is just kind of a hack I wanted to share that I've gotten, I always keep in my freezer now, these frozen meals from Bird's Eye is the brand. It's these sheet pan meals. There's a couple different varieties. It's called the Bird's Eye sheet pan meals. I get them in the family size. They have one that's like chicken and vegetables, and then there's a sausage and potato and vegetables. But basically on the nights where like I don't have anything else to cook, it's a real healthy option. You open the bag and you pour it on the pan, spread it all out. And I serve it with like brown rice if I had, because I normally have that in my pantry. But my kids eat this. My husband loves it too. It's normally green beans and chicken. So you get like a protein and a vegetable. And this is like, it's ready in 20 minutes. And This has saved me so many times. When we got back from Waco Sunday night, I had nothing. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry. I got back late Sunday night. It was Monday. I had to work Monday. I had to do a catch up on a lot of work. And then Monday night I had no groceries still. And I was like, oh, I have a sheet pan meal in the freezer. And that was our dinner.
That's
but It was a
awesome.
healthy option. And so that's one of my favorite things right now, to like just keep a couple in the freezer at all times for those nights that you're just like, I got nothing.
Yeah.
Literally nothing. So
good for you.
Good.
I love those when they come in clutch. It's amazing.
Yes. This episode of the Cold Coffee Club is brought to you by us. This is an open call to be part of Houston Moms. Are you an area mom who enjoys writing? Are you interested in connecting with other moms and creative writing? Do you enjoy social media, creating reels, and being a local influencer? Are you an in the know mom, the one whose friends always text because you've got the scoop, whether it's knowing what's happening around town or knowing the how-tos when it comes to your baby or your toddler or your teen? Well, we would love to share your voice. We want to hear from women who are often unheard or underrepresented when it comes to all parts of their motherhood experience. For this open call, our goal is to give space to the voices and experiences we aren't publishing yet. If you enjoy writing, are passionate about motherhood, and don't see your experience represented by our content, we would love to hear from you. We would especially love to see representation from our northern and southeastern portions of Houston, and diversity is incredibly important to us. So, is it your voice and experience that we're missing? We want to hear from you. Or maybe it's not you, but it's your friend who would be perfect for this. We hope that you will tell them about this opportunity. Now, this is a volunteer position, but there are some really fun perks to make it all worthwhile. And as a note, you do not have to be an amazing writer to apply. We are simply looking for local moms who love to share stories, have a passion for motherhood and their community, and are looking for a way to connect. Want to know more? Click the link in our show notes. All right, back to the show.
Today, we are digging into a topic that is a little bit heavier, but I think it really needs to be talked about. We are going to discuss breaking generational traumas and toxic patterns in our families. I think most of us have some experience with this. Just things that were, if you think about toxic patterns and generational traumas, it tends to be things that haunt your family history, and it kind of affects how you move in the world now, especially when raising children. So for me personally, I think about how things were done in my family, and there's that attitude of, well, we've always done it this way. Like, doesn't mean it's the right way, but okay. So we're going to talk about kind of what our toxic patterns are in our own families, but then also ways to overcome them. So for me, my family has a history of believing kids are seen and not heard, and it's not necessarily a safe space to share emotions or feelings. And then, we talked about discipline a couple episodes ago, and in my family, it was okay to hit your kids, and that's just really not my thing, but that's how you raise children. There's also kind of a pattern in my family where the children are taking care of the adults. The adults weren't really in the mental space in a lot of cases, or financial space, to where they could handle all of what it meant to be an adult and a parent. So then the kids were sort of responsible for being the leaders and being the adults. And then one thing I didn't realize till more recently is that a lot of us in my family we're not taught basic life skills. So budgeting, or just how to manage your household, things like that. We were kind of taught to be dependent on our families, and we needed you to show us what to do, versus going out into the world and already being equipped after your childhood. And, these are all things that I don't really want for my children. And it's also important to note that most of the parents in my family were single parents. And so that kind of lends into how things were done. the certain styles of discipline. It was like, I need to get this out of you so that you can go into the world and I don't have to worry about you. Or, you know, if you get in trouble at school, that means I can't go to work and we can't make it. So I'm going to make sure that you are going to behave. So if that means I have to spank you or whatever to get you to behave, that's what I'm going to do, because we have to survive this way. And even today, while I'm raising my children, some of the older folks in my family are like, you're not doing it right. Like, you let your child go outside with no jacket on? I'm like, I sure did, because he's going to realize he's cold and come back in.
And then he will correct that himself.
Yeah. Exactly. And they're like, what if he gets sick? I'm like, well, the cool thing is, if he's sick, I work from home, it's going to be fine. But to them, they're in survival mode. And that's kind of where they were as parents. Like, you can't get sick. This is not going to work for us. I feel like in some ways, race has something to do with it, just because of history and being in that survival mode. I think some of the older people in my family don't understand that we're not in the exact same scenario that they might have been in. It's not the same kind of world now as it was back then. There are some parallels, sure, but it's just a different world, and we have access to things that they might not have had access to. We are in a world where, you know, I am very big on mental health, and I will get the help that I need and whatnot. And the older folks in my family, they're like, we didn't do that. And I'm like, yeah, I know, it shows. Like, I know.
You don't say.
Right. So,
really?
You know, their parenting style also included their mental stuff that they were going through and overcoming from their childhoods, and then it was passed on to the next and the next. And I'm like, yeah, we're gonna stop that. So, you know, I think most of us and most of our listeners understand that there are a lot of things our parents did because it was done to them and they just thought it was right. But luckily for a lot of us, we're noticing that I don't think that panned out too well, and that's not really how I want things to go for me and my kids. So moving forward is a big deal.
Right. You know, I often hear, you know, you'll hear people talk about like, well, we did this when we were kids and we turned out okay. And I want to go, but did you though? Did you?
Right.
I don't know. Let's really assess that. Yeah. But I want to say too, I have some hope in a lot of ways for our kids and their kids, because I do think that society as a whole is, you know, I think, you know, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, whatever, to say like, oh, we're in marriage counseling was very private and very taboo. You did not share that. Or to say, I go to therapy, I'm in counseling. Oh no, like that was very, we don't let people know that. You know, I make it like when I go to see my counselor, or when my husband goes to see his therapist, like we tell our kids that we're doing that, because we're very like open that like, oh, we struggle with you know, your daddy has anxiety, and like we tell our kids that because our kids have anxiety stuff, you know, like we feel like this sometimes too, you know, and you're like, we're the same. And like, we all have things that make us feel worried, and we all have things that make us feel this way. And so they don't feel like they're alone and feel weird and feel crazy. Like we tell our kids these things. And I think I love that people are more open about that now, because it normalizes the need that we all have to kind of unpack those things. And that even those diagnoses those labels aren't looked at as shameful.
Right.
So if you say I have, you know, I take medication because I have this, no one is like, oh, well, I'm not going to let my children go to your home. You know, it's well, okay, great. So glad that you have had that help for this, you know, that's wonderful for you. Yeah. And honestly, like that's healthier than shoving it down and pushing it down and ignoring, you know, that's wonderful. I think another thing that I love about this generation is, you know, again, decades and decades ago, fatherhood in general was kind of looked at as like dad is there to provide and dad is there to kind of guide sometimes, but he's just kind of there in the background, and mom is more the primary parent.
Mhm.
And dads kind of are like, hey son, how you doing? Pat you on the back. And I'm just kind of in and out, in and out, in and out. Where now fatherhood is very much like championed as this, like it is very much looked at as a good thing to be a very present father. And men are shown in media and in movies and TV as they are really painting men that are good fathers in a very good light. And I love that because it's, I mean, study after study after study has shown how much present fathers make a great impact on their children. And whether even if it's a divorced father, but just a present father, whether he's, in the home full time or not, just having a present dad. And that's not to say if you don't have a present dad that you're doomed, you're not, but just I think a lot of times men were told in the past that they didn't need to be there that much, and that wasn't a requirement for them. And now they are seeing like, no, this is a good thing for you to be part of your kids' lives. And I just love that we are now showing that positively. And it's not like this joke, like, oh, it's like a sissy thing to do to be a good father. Like, no, like this is a good thing for you to be a part of your kids' lives. And so just recognizing patterns that, like, going like, oh, like I'm seeing that I'm being like my father in this way. I'm seeing like I'm being my mother in this way. And knowing, when I talk to girlfriends and I talk to friends of ours that go like, oh, like just being introspective enough to go like, maybe and recognizing that your parents were doing the best they could with what they had. We don't need to villainize everybody, and we don't need to make it be like, oh, everyone was awful, because that's not the case. But just to go like, what were some things, what did I feel like as a 10-year-old when this happened? Okay, now I have a 10-year-old. What can I do differently to not repeat that? And that's all you have to do. You don't have to drag everyone through the mud and make everyone look like a villain, but just to go like, how can we make changes moving forward?
I noticed it's funny when you pointed out that like, oh, I'm being like my mother or whatever. I was noticing that just recently. I have to remind myself that my children are entities on their own. They are not a direct they're not like a direct reflection of me. So when they mess up, that is their mess up, and like, okay, you own that. That's you. I remember growing up, you were not allowed to leave the house just looking a hot mess. I'm like, Ashley, fix yourself up. And I was such a tomboy as a kid. I was like, I don't want to. Like, I was just grubby and gross. And I was noticing myself getting frustrated with my kids, like, y'all look like, can you wash your face? Like, how do you have toothpaste on your clothes? Like in the morning, what are we doing? And I have to remind myself, Ashley, it did not feel good to feel more or less like property as a kid. Like, you are an extension of me. You need to come out looking this way and make me look good. And I really had to think about that. It does not feel good. So why would you do it to them? They are not, their accomplishments are not yours. Their failures are not yours. That is their journey. Let them have that. When they've done something great, let them enjoy, I did this. I'm awesome. And it's not like I'm such a great mom. My kid did this. Look at me. And I really had to sit back and think on that because I was noticing so much that I was doing it to them. And I'm like, well, that's the first step, in my opinion, is just like acknowledging like, hey, that wasn't right when it was happening to you. Why would you want someone else to feel that way? And I think that is just literally the first step to just kind of breaking that pattern and making the narrative so like different. It's your chance to make a difference. So
Exactly. If you want to like kind of break it down and go like, how do you change it? Like, what do you do? Like, how do you, if there's something that you go, I know that my family's, you know, I have a family pattern of addiction, maybe like there's addiction in my family, or there's a pattern of you know, verbal, you know, my family they were yellers, you know, maybe you say that, like, I mean, there was yelling in my house or something like that. I think you just go, look, you just, first you have to just acknowledge it and just say out loud, like, you know, I have a friend that she says one thing she struggles with is that her husband came from not a household of yellers. They were a quieter home, and that she really is, she struggles, like her instinct is to yell, and that's because her home they yelled. And so when she's mad at her kids, she starts going off, and her husband's very uncomfortable with it, and he's just like, I just don't like that you do this. And she understands, she doesn't want to, you know, but again, it's just like, this is the pattern, you know, it's like, it's what I was taught, and this is where I go. And one, just acknowledge and tell your kids, like, I know this isn't right. Like, I know, and mommy doesn't want to do this. And this is just like my instinct that comes out of me is that I start hollering, and get help with those things. That's the second thing. And go seek counseling and go to therapy and go to get those things and go, I don't want to do this anymore. And you know, step one is acknowledging that you don't like it and you want to change it. And step two is taking that step to go change it. Don't just talk about it, like go fix it. And number three is just like doing that introspection and like, what are those triggers? What takes you from being okay to not being okay? What is that? Is it a certain atmosphere? Is it a certain environment? I know personally, I get very triggered by chaos, by too many people coming at me with too many questions. And if I'm being interrupted when I'm trying to do something, that is a big trigger for me. But work on changing those habits. And then also just like rewriting that story and going, it's never too late to make those changes. And even if you've been parenting one way for 15 years, okay, year 16 is when you can make that change. You know, it's not too late to change things. It never is too late to change things. And you never know how you can impact your kids by owning it and going, hey, I've been doing something one way for a long time, and I'm going to make a change. And that could be so impactful to them to go like, I own this and I'm sorry. And we're going to make a change.
And that even goes for, you know, we're adults, but even our older parents, grandparents, they can notice like, hey, okay, what I was doing at that time, it made sense. I'm sorry if it impacted you this way. And, you know, I've had conversations with family members where I'm like, I did not like how you did A, B, and C. And here's how it's manifesting in my life now. And I just thought you should know that it did affect me. And a lot of them didn't realize, like, I did not know this was happening. I didn't know that you were, you know, feeling this way. I'm sorry. And I will, you know, do my best to approach you in a different way. Like, game changer right there. Just the fact that you acknowledged and that you see that this had some kind of impact on me, and then you're willing to try to do it differently. That's enough for me. So just, and not going like, well, and you're getting all defensive, you know, just going like, wow, I didn't know. And I'm sorry. I should have done it differently. Okay. You know, people were doing the best they could with what they had. Very few people are like truly evil at their core. I believe, you know, there's not, I don't feel like there's a ton of people that like set out to make you miserable. They're like, they didn't wake up and they didn't deliver their babies and look at them and go like, I hope to make you miserable and, you know, ruin your life. Like no one's doing that. No one's choosing that, you know? And it's like, I mean, I think people truly are doing what they feel is best. But just sometimes it's off, you know? And I think sometimes people are acting out of fear, or they're acting out of, you know, pain, like hurts, their own hurts. Or
trying to protect, or trying, you know, there's a lot of different reasons that people do the things that they do. But not talking about it isn't helping anybody, you know, and ignoring things isn't helping anybody. And therapy, everybody, therapy.
Amen. Amen. The great thing about motherhood is that we have a chance right now to rewrite stories.
Yes.
So
there's a book I want to recommend.
Yeah.
It's not really a therapy book, but it's just a really good book that I feel like applies to this. And the title is going to sound jarring. Like the title, you're going to be like, what? I feel like we might have talked about it actually. It's I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy.
Oh my gosh, I just read that book. It is brilliant.
And I feel like just it's and it's a memoir.
Yes.
About a child actress, Jeanette McCurdy, who's on the show iCarly. Just kind of speaking about her relationship with her mother. And I mean, and lots of other things too, but mostly about her relationship with her mom. And again, like has a lot of grace for her mother. I mean, it's not like, and I hated her. And I obviously the title sounds a little aggressive, but
there's meaning behind all that.
But yeah, it's called I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy. And I think if you have whether even if you have a great relationship with your mom, as I have a good relationship with my mother and I enjoyed this book, I don't think you have to you don't have to like have a toxic relationship with your parent to enjoy the book. I think it's a great book regardless, but if there is someone in your life, any parent or sibling or something like that, that you have just a complicated relationship with, I think that would be a great book to read as well. And just kind of see someone that's kind of come through that healing on the other side. It's really interesting how she's kind of processing all that.
Hey Houston, we want to hear from you. Are you a local business owner, media personality, author, influencer, or just someone who has something we really need to hear about? Email us at admin@houstonmom.com and tell us a little about yourself. Maybe we can have you on an episode. Back to the show.
All right, Jenny, what is your Houston Moms house blend for this week?
So I am married to a Louisiana boy and he loves himself some crawfish. He, you know, I don't really enjoy watching the process happen, but it is crawfish season. And Kim has updated our annual Houston Moms Guide to Crawfish season, and that is up on the Houston Moms website. So if the crawfish is your jam, I just want to draw your attention to that, whether you call it mud bugs or whatever you want to call it.
Yes.
Crawdads. I don't know. It's up.
Yeah.
We have a guide to where to get all the best crawfish in Houston.
I'm just going to like go down the list and just go everywhere. Be like, well, it's on the list. I'm going to try it all out. And while you're eating crawfish, we also have a guide to where to get the best margaritas in Houston, because
now that I'm in for.
Yeah. That sounds perfect. We just updated and added some new places to go. And listen, they go hand in hand. This is perfect.
Yes, we love it. We love a good marg.
All right, so for our see you later caffeinator, I just found this meme online. It says, pain travels through family lines until someone is ready to heal it in themselves. By going through the agony of healing, you no longer pass the poison chalice onto the generations that follow. It is incredibly important and sacred work. Y'all.
All right.
That's a whole word. I love it. It puts it so simply. We are choosing to make different choices. And that's just how it goes. I love it.
I love that. Well, I hope everyone has a great week, and I hope this has given you something to think on and chew on. And
thanks for joining the Cold Coffee Club.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
You've been listening to the Cold Coffee Club, brought to you by Houston Moms. We wish you a fabulous week with your families and look forward to sharing many more cups of cold coffee with you.